welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In continuation with the series on sociological research method, in today's lecture we are going to discuss digital ethnography. Now we have in the previous lecture discussed what is ethnography and how sociologists carry on ethnography in terms of data collection. In today's lecture, let us focus on digital ethnography, and this is more relevant because we know that we are living in a digital age. We are surrounded with all kinds of media, and that is the necessity to understand how media impacts the everyday life. So today we are going to look into what we understand from digital ethnography, the evolution of digital ethnography and its significance in sociology. So let us start. Digital media are not exceptional but integrate to everyday life world, demanding ethnography but integrate sensory, material and intangible digital elements, that is atmosphere and algorithm. Digital ethnography, here we are going to refer to the work of Sarah Pink. The title of the book is Principle and Practice, published in 2016. In this book, the authors propose a non-digital centric framework for ethnographic research in worlds entangled with digital media, material and senses. Now, if we kind of confuse when we think that digital ethnography is only to do with the digital framework, it would be incomplete. Why? Because the digital framework is interacting with the human. So, we can't just look into the data and the algorithm. We at the same time need to look into the human aspect, and this is what the authors are proposing here. The book traces ethnography evolution through disciplinary strands and turns, and the major turns are in terms of the gender, visual, sensory and digital. The authors have advocated 5 principles: multiplicity, non-digital centricness, openness, reflexibility and unorthodoxy. Now these 5 principles are the core principle guiding the evolution of digital ethnography. The book begins by rejecting a rigid prescriptive definition of ethnography. A rigid prescriptive definition would be in terms of understanding what is digit, what are the various kinds of digit, and therefore this book is shifting from the old ethnographic methods to the new one, in which it adopts Karen O'Reilly's view, and the view is ethnography is iterative inductive research. So throughout the lecture, we are going to see how ethnography is more about everyday life. It is more in terms of the interaction between the digits and the human, and the sociologist here is reflecting on their own self as data. So here the idea that ethnography is iterative inductive research implies that research design isn't fixed at the start. It evolves as the researcher learns from the field. So in the traditional method, there was an assumption that as soon as we go to the field, we have a research design, and this research design was framed, or the framework was already designed, and it used to remain the same throughout the data collection period. In this book by Sarah Pink and others, it is kind of illustrating that the research design is not fixed, it is evolving. And how is it evolving? It is evolving as the researcher is in continuous interaction with the respondents, and through that interaction the design is evolving. Now another important part of this understanding of digital ethnography is that it is adopting a non-centric approach. Now what is a non-centric approach? It argues that to understand digital life, we shouldn't focus only on screens or apps. We must look at the whole person, the physical environment and the sensory experience. So we know that when we are kind of looking into, say, a non-centric approach, implies that we're not only going to look into the digital world per se. Here, say for instance, if we're going to understand the influence of mobile phones on children, we are not only looking into what brand the phone is or what kind of other different channel that the child is watching, we also need to look into his or her environment, the physical environment, whether the child is all by himself or herself, or there is an absence of the parents from the house, which gives them that freedom to be on the mobile. There are different kinds of the social environment which needs to be understood in order to have a more holistic understanding of the impact of mobile on the children. So, when we go into understanding digital ethnography, we need to understand how we define the ethnographic stand. Research must account for things we can't see, like the vibe of an online community, the feeling of presence when texting a loved one, or the invisible algorithm that shape what we see. So, here is like there is a lot of emotions, there are a lot of kind of feeling in terms of texting, the WhatsApp, even in terms of doing a study of say a family WhatsApp group, the kind of messages that are shared, we need to kind of understand more beyond just the text, and that is why defining the digital ethnographic stance becomes significant. Here in this book, the authors draw from scholars like Cowdery and Moores. They treat media as a practice, something people do rather than something they consume. They align with the Horst and Miller's view that digital anthropology is as fundamental as religious anthropology, focusing on what it means to be human in the digital age. Ethnography is always shaped by the domain it engages, and that is the field. Activates particular methods, theory, and sensory orientation rather than providing a neutral backdrop. A digital ethnographer in gaming world will typically mobilize different devices, platform, theoretical language, rather than an ethnographer following office workers through meetings, corridors, and email thread. Ethnography is iterative practice that takes form with specific social material and digital environments, rather than a fixed recipe transported unchanged from site to site. And here, in order to understand the flexible nature of ethnography, we kind of look into the understanding of the two venue or the two field. One is the digital gaming, an ethnographer studying online games, versus office ethnography, that is a researcher trying to understand the everyday relations, the work pattern and working conditions in an office. So, as the field changes, say from a virtual world versus the shop floor. So, when we talk about digital gaming, it is a virtual world, but when we are talking about office ethnography, we are doing this research on the shop floors. What counts as participation, observation, relevant artifact, and even ethical dilemma also shift. So, as we shift from virtual world to the actual office place, how we participate, because participant observation is one of the methods of ethnography, how we do our observations will also going to change. So, gaming ethnography often uses screen capture, in-game chat logs, social network data, platform analytics, and multi-sited following across Discord, Twitch, Reddit, and the game itself. Office ethnography, on the other hand, tends to foreground shadowing, meeting observation, document traits, organizational charts, and analysis of control discretion and resistance in bureaucracies and workplace routines. So, we know that they are kind of different theoretical lens, they are different because we are studying two different worlds. One is a virtual online game and the other is the work. So, we need to apply differentiated theoretical lens. Digital game ethnographer commonly draw on theories of virtual world, online community, play, masculinity, toxicity, and the platform governance These are the concepts like Bourdieu's field or capital, habitus, symbolic violence, masculinity studies. These are the theoretical lenses that could be used by ethnographers studying the online gaming. When we move to the corporate or organizational ethnographer, often mobilize labor process theory, neo-Marxist analysis of control and consent, ethnomethodology, and symbolic interactionism to grasp how organizations are enacted through everyday labor. So, the focus will be more in terms of applying, say, labor theory or applying Marxist analysis, neo-Marxist analysis to understand the everyday work relation in the corporation. Now, what are the methodological implications of using different theoretical lens to study different areas? Because fields are differently mediated, the family of methods attached to ethnography, that is a number of methods are used together in there is no just one fixed method, but multiple numbers of methods are used, and these are like participation, interviewing, recording, elicitation diaries, etc. So, these are kind of logging into a guild rate demands other competencies than entering a police station or factory shop floor. This underscores that ethnography is best understood as a flexible, field sensitive way of doing research, not a property of any single discipline or a universally fixed toolkit. There is no one, say, a box or a toolkit which the researcher can use and strict only to that. So, there is a kind of completely flexible on the researcher depending on the area of research, the theoretical lens, that these family of methods could be used. Here in this book on ethnography, digital ethnography, the authors are using O'Reilly's foundational definition. Ethnography rests on iterative inductive design that evolved through the study, drawing from a family of methods, emphasizing theory, researchers' reflexibility, and human as both object and subject. So, core activities include immersion in daily lives via watching, listening, questioning, all culminating in a thick descriptive accounts that honor lived experience complexity. Digital ethnography is an evolving adaptation where conventional method persists yet shift in forms and ethic. There are a lot of changes, yes, from the what was being done in the previous past in terms of the understanding the field, going to the field and doing participant observation and extra. But as digital world is more active, as we have more access to internet and other technology, there have been digital shifts. Contact moves from physical co-presence to mediated forms like ongoing chat, social media invites, or digital tracking across platform. Observation and listening adapt to screen-based watching, example log stream, and reading posts or multisensory engagement beyond text. Representation expands beyond writing to videos, photos, blogs, or interactive format that capture digital human entanglement. This evolution maintains ethnography's commitment to context, rich understanding, while accommodating non-media centric approaches where technology is integral to everyday world. O'Reilly framework treats theory as integral but non-prescriptive, enabling dialogue between data and multiple paradigms rather than enforcing one disciplinary orthodoxy. This avoids rigid ownership claims, positioning ethnography as a practice adaptable across sociology, anthropology, and beyond. Researchers' ontological assumption, example about media, culture, or power, shape site selection, participant engagement, data capture, and interpretation in specific ways. So, what are the shared principles amid diversity? Team ethnography implies this. Different visions from social anthropology versus communication studies yield varied emphasis, such as sensory versus the platform focus analysis. Despite theoretical pluralism, the book advocates core principles like iterative design, reflexivity, multisensory engagement, and context sensitivity to guide digital ethnographic evolution. For labor or urban family studies, this supports blending neo-Marxist control theory with digital traces, for example, workers' app, under reflexive, principle-driven methods. Now let us try to understand how digital ethnography has been used across discipline, as it is kind of more varied, there is flexibility in its use. There are a number of disciplines that have taken advantage of the digital world to evolve the methods of data collection. So the ethnography has evolved through methodological turns driven by theoretical shift in social sciences such as gender, visual, sensory foci. These turns prompted parallel innovation in methods and reflexivity, challenging occult-century knowledge production. Key examples include Feminist Reflexibility in Beher, published in 1996, and Visveswaran, published 1994, alongside Visual Ethnography, published by Pink 2001, Banks 2001. These are names of the books published by authors. And Sensory Ethnography, Klassen 1993, Pink 2009. Now let us look into the turns of that have kind of evolved digital ethnography. The first turn was the gender turn, and this point emphasized reflexivity on knowledge context, with feminist ethnographers like Beher and Visveswaran examining women's life and positional bias in fieldwork. Here, to understand the gender turn in doing research, it's important to look back to the lecture on feminist methodology. The second turn is visual turn, critiquing site dominance, introducing photo elicitation, film and skilled visions as embedded in multisensory practices. The third is sensory turn, expanded beyond vision to touch, smell, sound via phenomenological methods, rethinking participation as multisensorial. And the authors who have used the sensory turn or advocate this multisensory are Klassen, House, Pink 2009 and Vanini. Now, when we look into these turns or method shift, there has been a kind of drift from the old traditional ethnography to leading to the development of new methodological ways in data collection. So, theoretical debate generated new tools: gender reflexivity via autoethnography, visual via media analysis, sensory via embodied elicitation and video diaries. These challenge positivist detached observation, favoring emplaced collaborative knowing. Relevance to digital ethnography, we know that the digital context accelerates these turns, integrating sensory visual method. For example, screen tracking, video walkthrough, these are now new methods for data collection with reflexivity for mediated field. Now, the second methodological trajectory of ethnography is that, as we have come to know through the discussion, that ethnography here is not rigid. It is not one size fits all recipe. That is, there is no one particular design or research framework that can be used for all researcher, and that in itself gives us the understanding that ethnography in this digital world is flexible. So, when it evolves and takes shapes from specific fields like sociology, design or media study and the researcher's own perspective. So, ethnography does not exist in a vacuum. It is activated by the field it is used in. A digital ethnographer studying gaming culture will use different tools and theories than one studying family or one studying the corporate office dynamic. Digital ethnography didn't just appear out of thin air. It is the result of multiple theoretical turns that have layered on top of each other over the last few decades. Rather than one trend replacing another, these ideas have consolidated. For example, a modern digital ethnographer doesn't look at the internet. They look at how the internet intersects with gender, sensory experience, and physical space simultaneously. So, let us look into the evolution of digital ethnography. As we have already discussed, that there has been a shift from virtual ethnography to a broader, more integrated digital ethnography. The starting point was around 2000, often credited to Christine Hine. This era focused on virtual ethnography. At this stage, researchers were often looking at the internet as a distinct space, a virtual world separated from the real world. Rather, the virtual and the real were considered as polar opposite. Now, we look into the predecessors. Even before 2000, scholars were investigating online communities like bulletin board system or early chat rooms, laying the groundwork for how we study human interaction through screens. What is the current state? In this current period, digital ethnography is intersectional. It doesn't just study the digital in isolation, it integrates. And what are the dimensions that it integrates? When we say digital and the human interaction, there are certain areas where the integration has to be understood. The first, as already discussed, are gendered relations. How the identity of the researcher and the participant, online and offline, affects the data. The second is consolidated turns, taking lessons from sensory turn, how things feel or sound, or the material turn, the physical devices we use, and applying them to digital space. So, the gender, the sensory, and the material, they are interacting with each other, and to study the digital world, we need to look into this intersectionality. Now, if we look into the key theoretical shift taking place, or what we call as consolidated, it means that it holds several layers of theory at once. So, we look into some of the concept and what it means actually in the practice. So, the first concept is reflexibility. It implies that acknowledging the researcher is a gendered being who influences the digital space they are observing. The second concept is integration. Recognizing that the digital is no longer a separate virtual world, but it is woven into the fabric of daily life. Third is the concept of expansion. Using digital tool to expand what ethnography can actually do using GPS data, video logs, or social media archive. So, we look into these three concepts to understand the methodological shift in digital learning. Now, we need to understand the research timeline. That is, the strand of consolidation shows that there is a shift away from seeing the digital as a novelty and towards seeing it as a standard part of the human experience. The researcher's identity, their gender, background, and physical presence doesn't disappear just because the research is digital. Whether you are interviewing someone on Zoom or observing a Discord server, your own identity remains a lens through which you interpret the world. Different disciplines have claimed or turned towards ethnography to make sense of the digital. While anthropology and sociology have been the most vocal in creating formal definitions like digital sociology, other fields have used ethnography as a practical tool to solve specific problems. In fields like human-computer interaction, and informatics, ethnography isn't just about culture for culture's sake. It is used to challenge the industry's narrow view of the user. So, let us understand the ethnographic turn in human-computer interaction. Traditional computer science often views as a user a predictable operator interacting with machine to complete a task. As noted by Dowrish and Bell, ethnography introduces messiness of real life. It shows that people don't use technology in a vacuum. They use it while distracted in specific cultural context and through the lens of their own value. The user is reimagined as a social actor rather than just a data point. So, when we kind of look into the first part of the book by Pink et al., they argue that we should not just study the internet, but rather how the digital is lived. They challenge the online versus offline binary, suggesting that a social reality is a hybrid or entangled environment where digital and physical worlds are inseparable. The goal is to understand human life where the digital is just one layer. If you focus too much on the app or the platform, as a researcher, you will miss the human meaning behind the action. So, it is important to kind of understand the significance of digital ethnography in terms of understanding the humanness of the digital world. With this, I come to an end of the lecture. Thank you.